Welcome everyone to a very special Maynooth University alumni event. Welcome to our alumni who are here in the drama room on the North Campus of the university, and welcome to our alumni who are joining us around the world here today. It's a very special event. It's not every day or every year, or every decade even, that we get to welcome a new president here to the university. So it's my distinct pleasure to welcome Professor Eeva Leinonen here today. Thank you so much, Eeva, for being here. It's also perhaps one of the few blessings of COVID that we are so accustomed to having online and hybrid events. So that means there are so many folks here and all around that are able to join us. That's terrific. And although we love having people face to face and back on campus, we're certainly hoping to do much more of these hybrid events in the future to connect with our 90,000 plus alumni community around the world, which is really quite something. So we're going to jump right in, and I'm not going to go through the president's biography in detail because I'm sure that's going to come up in the course of the conversation, but just to say that Professor Leinonen joined us in October of 2021 last year, following 5 years as Vice Chancellor and President of Murdoch University in Perth, Australia. Prior to that, she held several leadership positions at universities in the UK and hails from Finland originally. And she is also the 5th president now of Maynooth University. It's since we became an independent university 25 years ago this year. So that's a milestone that we're marking with several events and discussions throughout the year. So stay tuned for some more information on those. It's also a chance for the university to really be looking ahead and thinking about the next chapter of this important institution. And that is something we'll touch upon today with the formation of the strategic plan. So look for more chances to engage along those lines as well. And now I'm going to turn it over to our interviewer for the afternoon rather, and that's Professor John O'Brennan. John is the Jean Monnet Professor of European Integration and Director of the Maynooth Centre for European and Eurasian Studies. He is a frequent voice in the Irish media, particularly on issues related to Brexit, so that's kept him very busy over the last few years. He's also been a wonderful friend and supporter of all sorts of alumni engagement efforts, so we're really thrilled to have John here and thank him for this discussion and role you're playing today, John. Do feel free to pop questions into the chat, and we'll have lots of time for questions throughout the event. With that, thanks everybody.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Rebecca. It's wonderful to be able to reconnect with our alumni. I will say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And it's a pleasure to be able to speak today to Eeva. I'm going to begin by asking you, who are you and where are you from? You might tell us something about your background growing up in Finland and how you progressed through the education system.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that question, and it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the introduction, Rebecca. And I want to thank you for this opportunity to connect with yourself, John, but also, of course, the alumni community. And thank you those of you who have joining online, but also some of you who are here today. So yes, I hail from Finland, born and brought up there. I come from a family of 5. I have 2 brothers. And we were all first in family to go to university. My hometown is Oulu, which is almost on the Arctic Circle, about maybe 150 kilometers down from the Arctic Circle. And so I'm very used to cold winters, long winters, snow 4 to 6 months a year, and also quite cool summers. The schooling in Finland, as we all know, is well renowned for quality and diversity as well. But when I think back to my schooling, I think one of the most significant elements of that experience was that somehow the schooling enabled me to believe that I wasn't really bad at anything. Isn't that a remarkable thing to say? Yeah. And I think it was very strength-based. And it sort of kind of build up your belief in yourself and self-confidence and so on. So that's a little bit about me and Finland. And I come from a family, working class family, but my kind of previous generations are sort of country folk and also foresters. So I seem to have that sort of countryside and forests and trees particularly as an important part of my life. And as Rebecca said, I've been in Australia. I was there about 8.5 years altogether. And the most curious thing was that it took me about 18 months to 2 years to kind of feel at peace with the nature there, which is important for me. And I think it was because the trees looked so different.
Yeah.
You know, having gum trees is something I would have never experienced before, coming from the sort of forests of Finland and having also spent a long time in the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
So that gives you a little bit of sense of who I am and where I come from, and I think it gives also a bit of an indication to you what's important to me in life.
One of the fascinating things about Finland is that it is a small state within the European Union, like Ireland. And as a result of the Ukraine war, there are lots of questions being asked in Finland about its future. I wonder, have you sort of thought about Ireland since you got here through the prism of Finland, or tried to compare the experiences of both countries? How do you think we compare those two small little states at either side of the EU?
Yes, it's a really important question, and I think more important so at this point in time, given what is happening in Ukraine. So we have similar questions to ask as nations about, for instance, as you know, Finland has decided to join NATO, and that's a big decision for Finland, for a small country with a border of 800 miles. With our neighbor. I have to share with you that having a big neighbor and powerful neighbor as a Finn is something that shaped your life quite dramatically throughout your life. So having now experienced the Ukraine war, I think the experience perhaps for myself and my fellow Finns has been a little bit different, because it sort of brings home some of those messages that we grew up with as young kids and young people. Looking at Ireland and Finland, it's interesting. People have asked me, how have you settled since October arriving here? And the honest answer is I feel at home. And I sort of reflected on that. And I think it's partly because there are many similarities with the two small nations, but also I think our connection to our land, our history, there's some that resonate with each other. Being part of the European Union is important to both countries and myself as a person. And you know, having come back from Australia back to Europe, I now realize it was actually very important for me to come to a European country. So, and also I think we have quite a similar kind of a view of literature, theatre, arts, humanities, social justice, human rights. There's a lot of things that resonate with the two nations.
Yeah, it's been wonderful to see how Ireland's diplomatic relationships have been deepening in recent years, including with Finland.
Yes.
And I look forward to more of that in the years to come. You mentioned literature. I was reminded as you were speaking that when I was going to university, my best friend was actually from Oulu, if you can believe it. And she talked to Ireland fantastically well.
Yes.
It was almost seamless, actually.
It is.
Yeah, but one of the questions that intrigues us, I think many of us, about a university president is this kind of scope of your interests. You mentioned the countryside and nature, and that's very important to you, but also reading. I wonder, what do you read? What are you really interested in?
So being an academic, as you know, books are very important to us. And I'm actually still a little bit old-fashioned.
Yeah.
I like to get hold of a book and feel it. I spend a lot of my time in libraries and bookshops. So what do I read? My bedside table, I always have a pile of books. Since I've come to Ireland, I have been particularly interested in reading about Ireland. So I have books that I dip into. And also, I usually have a fiction book or two on the go. So just a couple of books that I sort of dip into with an Irish background. I don't know whether you know Mary O'Donnell, who is a poet and a writer, a Maynooth University alumnus. She came here about a month or 6 weeks ago and did a poetry reading. And I purchased 2 of her books, and she was kind enough to sign them, which was lovely. And they are on my bedside table, and I dip into them quite regularly. They're beautiful, very powerful poems. You probably know On Legendary Heroes, which is apparently a well-known poem in Ireland. And also These April Fevers is the other book that I have at the moment. Also, this is quite a nice story, I think, that when I first arrived here, one of the politics lecturers, Mary Murphy, gave me a book on Irish politics and said, this is the most up-to-date book, Eeva. You do need to read this. And it's called the Oxford Handbook of Irish Politics. It's quite big, so you don't sit down and read it in one go. So there are chapters there, they're very well written. So that's also on my bedside table.
Yeah, it's a wonderful book for anybody out there interested in the topic. I think we're now going to questions from our alumni in this section. So to introduce those questions, I'll call on my colleague again, Rebecca, and Rebecca is going to put the questions for us. Rebecca.
Question from Anya Lawler, who is interested to know what the President's thinking is and aspirations and plans are with regard to the interface between Maynooth University and the community of Maynooth.
Yes, a very important question, and I live in Maynooth.
Same here.
And love it, and I think it's a beautiful little community, but also before I arrived here, people were very keen to tell me that it's, I think people said it's the only university town in Ireland. So the interface of the university and Maynooth community is important. And I have had an opportunity to make a few connections. But one of my hopes for our new strategy would be is that we strengthen our external engagement, including with our local community, and find ways in which we could welcome the local community more to our campus, to enjoy the facilities, the campus itself, but also come to open lectures. And there was, of course, the Arts and Minds Festival, which we had recently, had very good attendance from local communities, and also even further afield in Kildare and Dublin. So my plan would be to have a very strong connection. And as I said, we have started our strategic planning, and part of that will be connecting with the local community. So I'm very keen to hear the voice of the community. What would they expect from the university? How can I serve, as the new president, the local community? One of the sort of underpinning principles that I have in life is that my role is very much in the service of society. And I like to have an opportunity to learn how I serve Maynooth society and community best. So I look forward to that conversation. And if there are any alumni listening to us, and I know there's Ina here, to reach out to me and invite me to things. And if I can, I always will come. And I enjoy a great variety of different types of activities. So please reach out to me.
Rebecca, I wonder whether we're ready now for our second question.
I think we're ready to come live from Paris.
Excellent.
Excellent. So live from Paris coming in, Roisin Dockery. Thanks so much for being with us today. If you want to go ahead with your question for the President.
Good afternoon. Congratulations, President, on your nomination. I hope you're settling into Maynooth well. Can you tell us about your decision to move back to Ireland, back to Europe, from Australia? As you said, I'm based in Paris, and it's certainly an interesting time to be living in these times here in Europe and thinking about what identity means. I'd be curious to learn about your reasons for coming back to Ireland, to Europe, and Maynooth specifically. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that question, and thank you taking part in this conversation from Paris. I had just started my second term as president at the university I worked in Perth in Australia when the pandemic struck. And I have one daughter who lives in London, and as I say, I just have a very small family in Finland. And And we had a wonderful way in which my daughter and I met around the world 4 times a year. So we had an interesting life for many years. And when the pandemic struck, it became obvious that this cannot continue. And particularly given that the Australian borders became very hard. And it was quite difficult even to get out and then go back. And my daughter was not able to come to Australia at all. And like many people, I think through this pandemic era, we all started to think about life, work-life balance. How do we enable to live a good life in an altered reality? So I came back to England for, I think it was Christmas 2020. And as I was saying goodbye to my daughter, and we looked at each other, she said, "When do you think, Mum, we will see each other again?" And we realized we had no answer. So at that point, I was absolutely crystal clear what my path was going to be, which was to come back to Europe. And I hadn't thought about Ireland. I have to be absolutely clear about and honest about that. I thought about UK, I thought about Finland, and then Maynooth came up. And I started to do research, talk to a lot of people, and more I got to know Maynooth from a distance, to more I started to feel that there was a real connection. And, I was looking for the fit for myself, the same way as the university was looking at whether I fit the university. And then when I was offered the role, I followed my instincts and I followed my gut. And I'm very pleased to say that I did that. But I think many people are making these quite major decisions. As I say, I was just starting my 2nd term as president. I was excited about that opportunity to do an extra 5 years, another 5 years. But I'm so delighted I'm here. And as I said earlier, I feel a bit like I've come home.
Yeah. I think there was a second question from Andrew.
Yes, so thanks for that, President, and thanks to Roisin too. And I must say, Roisin, thank you. Roisin is a member of our Alumni Advisory Board at Maynooth, so thanks for your service and participation in that. We now would love to have a question from another alum, Andrew Parrish, who did his BSc with us in 1991. Andrew?
Hi everyone, and given the Eurovision theme, welcome from the Dublin jury here on St. Stephen's Road. We couldn't make it to Maynooth today. Professor Leinonen, it's great to see you and congratulations again on your appointment. I'm keen to understand, given your experience both in the UK and in Australia with different universities and different systems, given that the traditional role of a university has been to act as an independent institution, improving society, expanding knowledge and educating the next generation. But in Ireland, particularly, universities are majority funded by the state, typically based simply on the number of students that are enrolled. So my question is, how can the university retain standards and retain an independent voice to build an institution that inspires both staff and students to drive a research agenda and create a future workforce when you're so reliant on state funding?
Thank you, Andrew, for that very important and very relevant questions at this point in time. As you know, Andrew, we are just at the moment going through a legislative process looking at the new higher education reform bill. And there are some elements in that might be challenging the concept of autonomy in Irish higher education. And I think that is something that we do need to see how it plays out into the future. Andrew, also thank you for recognizing so clearly that universities are there to serve society. I've already spoken about that earlier. I truly believe in that. If you look at the Universities Act 1997, the Irish Universities Act, it talks about academic freedom, which is one way of talking about autonomy. And it talks about it from an individual's perspective, academic's perspective, but also from the institution's perspective. So it's enshrined in the Universities Act. And I think autonomy is critical for universities in order for universities to be able to differentiate, to be able to have their own strategies and mission, and to be able to progress those in a way in which are relevant to that university. So autonomy is very important, as is academic freedom. I've seen challenges for balance between autonomy and accountability, and I want to be very clear that accountability is the other side of the coin of autonomy, but sometimes we swing too much towards accountability. I've seen that in places, and maybe, I don't know whether you can ever swing too much towards autonomy, but I think you need to find the right balance there. So I think we are on a journey in Ireland, and I kind of look forward to seeing, as I say, how the higher education reform bill, once it becomes law, will play out. Because there are some indications in that bill that the autonomy of university could become eroded. And I think we have to be very vigilant around that and very mindful. But it's a really important question. It's something that in the academic community we are very much engaged in and need to be, I think, very much defending the autonomy and academic freedom of universities.
Yeah. I guess after many years of drift where the universities had been calling on government to provide certainty about the funding model in particular, at least there's more certainty about that in the years to come.
Exactly. So, the funding announcement by Minister Harris was very welcome. There is a recognition that there is a shortage of funding. There's been erosion in the unit of resource over a period of time, and there's a commitment to trying to address that funding gap over a period of time. So that's very welcome indeed. But that's slightly separate from the reform bill. Yeah. So very much welcome the opportunity to address some of those funding challenges.
It's been this extraordinary time in the university sector, like the rest of society, I guess. But there's been so much change that has been kind of expedited by the pandemic.
Yes.
I wonder, Eeva, how do you see this? How do you see the implications of that for the university going forward? Yes. What will it be like 5 years from now or 10 years from now to teach in a university and to be a student of university?
I think that's the most critical question at this point in time that we have to ask when we are starting our strategic planning for the next 5 to 10 years. And we have to be asking, what does the university campus look like? Infrastructure, but also student engagement and also staff working on campus. And then how does that resonate with our interactions with external communities? So I think the pandemic has accelerated certain things like blended learning and online learning. It's accelerated working more flexibly, which is many ways a good thing. But I think we do need to think about what does that mean in the next 5 to 10 years. We're making big decisions about, for instance, infrastructure investment. Yeah. Where does that investment need to go to? And also digital infrastructure. I think people are now starting to really focus on that more in terms of what needs to be invested in order for us to deliver the type of learning and work in a way in which we may be preferring to work into the future. So at this point in time, it's a real inflection point. I think we need to give a lot of thought. We need to be quite creative. We might need to think about things from different perspectives that we may not have used to thinking about university education. I think we need to be flexible and we need to be agile and nimble. Those are the kind of key messages that I think the pandemic has delivered to all of us.
And do you think there's still a place for the formal university lecturer as it has evolved over hundreds of years? The 50-minute session in a room like this with students on a coherent topic? Or will we see a change in that kind of format in the years to come?
I think it depends on disciplines. So I think we need to be very respectful about the fact that different academic disciplines have different ways in delivering content, but also engaging with students. So that's the sort of given. So there is not a sort of blanket answer for it. I know that some universities are moving away from lectures. Some universities do not build lecture theatres anymore. They're looking for much more sort of flat structures, for instance, where there's an opportunity for more engagement, student engagement, interactive learning. That's something we need to think about as a university. But also, I think we need to be thinking about, how people's lives have changed. Something that I have heard in the last year or so is that, people are now organizing their lives, including students, in a different way. They work. Part of their learning is fitted with work more. They commute. Our students particularly are commuting students, quite a high percentage of them. So we need to think about how does all of that fit into the campus experience. I'm still at heart an old-fashioned person in the sense that I really believe that campus experience does offer something that is unique. It's a bit of a rite of passage for young people particularly, but also coming together and interacting in real life, in real person, adds the sort of value that you don't get online. And I think we all probably experienced that in the last few years, where you see people online, you have perfectly functional and productive discussions, but there are some elements of it that are not there and are missing quite clearly, and perhaps that then makes it a less satisfactory experience from time to time.
There was this horrifying moment last week, I'm not sure if you saw this, but a lecturer at one of the Sydney universities in Australia, first day of the new term, tweeted a photograph of an empty lecture theatre. It was a 9 o'clock class, and I was very interested to explore the reasons that students and faculty offered by way of explanation. But it does sort of present the challenge to us about how we bring life back to the university in a sense.
Yes, it does indeed, and I think that's one of the sort of big questions, as I say, that we have to explore for our strategy for the next 5 to 10 years. What does the campus experience look like? What is the compelling reason coming to campus? Information is so freely available now. Whenever we want to know something, we Google something. So the role of the tutor is probably changing, the academic, and also students' engagement with learning and materials is probably changing. So I think it's going to be a really exciting time, I think, to have an opportunity to explore that. But I think one of the things we also need to be is flexible. So, strategies can't be set in stone for the next 10 years. There has to be flexibility in it. So my sort of thought for Maynooth University's next strategy is that it's going to be quite high level, because then it gives you the flexibility, clear direction, but high level, but then sort of more detailed plans underneath it. And I think that's what we probably will work towards.
I wonder what your view is about the research infrastructure in Ireland's universities and the research culture. And I say this conscious that we often think of Finland as one of the real role models to emulate where research and development is concerned. And for all of Ireland's reputation as a high-tech global centre, we are still significantly behind small states like Finland and Israel in respect of our investment in research. I wonder what your impressions have been since you came about this.
I'm very impressed by, Irish research, and I'm very impressed how much is achieved actually for maybe a less of investment that you might see in other countries. So it's very impressive. And also just looking at the way in which Irish universities are interacting and also benefiting from European funding. That's very impressive too. You probably know that there is the new research strategy, national research strategy was announced last week, Impact 2030. I think there are some really good signals there, and one of the sort of strong signals there is about interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary research focused on global challenges, basically. And I think that's a good signal about the fact that there is more clarity about what our island's contribution will be in a sort of global scale.
Yeah.
So very much welcome that. And if I think about research at Maynooth University, which is very impressive, I think the great strength for us at Maynooth is that we have very strong arts, humanities, social sciences research, and science, technology, engineering research. And then I think our real opportunity is bringing that together, which we already do. And the bringing together comes, say, in climate change, comes in environment and sustainability, health, digitization, digital transformation, data. You know, there's so many opportunities there. And I'm sort of hoping that through the strategy development, we will kind of identify beacons that, you know, for Maynooth University that can be seen a long distance. And that's what we stand for. And I think that interface is one of those beacons that I could imagine shining very brightly.
You were the first woman appointed to head an Irish university, and then we saw two more women appointed at Trinity College and at Limerick. I just wonder about your thoughts on this, about how significant a breakthrough it is, and what is it like to be a woman leader of a university?
It's a very interesting question, and I'm sure you know I've been asked it quite a bit. And I was also the first female president in the previous university that I was, and I've been a first female vice president a few times. I actually find it a little bit difficult to answer that question, and the reason is because I don't think about my own gender. I realize I never thought about it. And I think it's possibly because of my Finnish background. So I come from a matriarchal society. I've had strong female role models. I just assumed that's the norm. And including my mother, who was a disabled person, but highly entrepreneurial and highly capable. And I now sort of sometimes smile to myself when I think about all those years I worked in the United Kingdom and Australia, and I probably just kept plowing through and not seeing a lot of things around me. And people must have said, "What is that woman doing? You know, she could just hold back a bit now." So I truly think that I have sort of seen it and seen the barriers, which is probably been good. However, having said all that, I have said this before, that being the first female president in Maynooth, it is not everything, but it's not nothing. And when I think about the not being not nothing, I think it is a significant event in Ireland, in culture and society here. I'm feel very privileged and honoured. I also feel some responsibilities attached to this role as a consequence of being a female, not just a president. And also I feel that it is my responsibility and other senior female leaders to be role models for girls and younger people coming through. And actually demonstrating that, you know, you can have a family, you can have a career. I actually just want to say a little bit about that family bit, is that, you know, I have a daughter who is now 27 and been to university and works in London. And, you know, for a long period of time, I was the single parent looking after my daughter. And like other parents, I had that fear that am I hurting my daughter by working? And I used to ask her periodically, would you like mum not to work? Would you like me to do something else? And she used to always look at me in total astonishment, saying, well, of course not. You know, mum, that's what you do. And I now realize that I always involved her very closely in my work. She would attend functions. She's been to so many graduations since a little tot. And also, so she's always been a kind of seen that this is just regular life. And then another sort of message I like to give, because there might be others in similar positions that I have been, is I recall when I was offered a role of vice president at King's College London, and I remember before accepting it, I went to see the president, and I said, I have a daughter, I want to be at her school plays, I want to be at her sports days. She's important to me, she's the center of my life. If that doesn't fit with yourselves, that's fine. But I think the important thing was that I put it on the table. And it's perfectly good and acceptable to do that, and we should do that as females and males. To say that I'm a whole person and I have a life, and that doesn't make me any more committed or successful in my role. And I think that's something that I think, being a female president, telling those kinds of stories, I think, is quite important.
One of the areas where you have showed great leadership is on Ukraine and helping people. Our alumni may not be so aware of this, so perhaps you could say something about what Maynooth has done to help Ukrainian refugees and what is being done sort of nationally as well.
Yes. So, like all universities and, the world, we were all shocked to see what was happening in Ukraine, and we decided as a university to make a strong statement from the beginning, which we all thought was the right thing to do. At the same time, we wanted to be very mindful of our colleagues from Russia, and the fact that we wanted to be supportive of all people in the Maynooth community, and we made that clear in our statement. We had a discussion with the department and Minister Harris about how might we as a nation enable Ukrainian students, but also researchers, to find their way to Irish universities. And the idea of a help desk came up, and Maynooth University, we suggested we could lead that development. So we have done. And that help desk has been launched, and we are working with other universities for the help desk to take inquiries, direct students, and also research staff and others who may wish to connect with Irish universities. So that's a piece of work that we've undertaken in the last 6 weeks, literally. So I'm very proud of the university and my colleagues, and Dr. Gemma Irvine and her team have particularly been leading this. But I think it's the sort of thing you would expect Maynooth University to step up in.
Yeah, I have a Ukrainian PhD student actually who has lived here quite a long time, but his family were bombed in the first days of the war. His 83-year-old father, badly injured, and he got them to Ireland, and they were taken in by one of my colleagues for a while before they moved on. So that's just one example of so many.
Yes. And of course, we are part of Scholars at Risk scheme. We have a refugee from Afghanistan who's just joined us, and his family. So, I think we are doing the right things that you would do as a university, but also particularly Maynooth University, where we are very much aligned with social justice, human rights, equality, diversity, doing the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'd like to again go to questions from our alumni and back to Rebecca.
Thanks for that, John. I'm just going to remind everyone that's tuning in online, I see some hands going up. We're in a webinar format, so unfortunately I can't call on you with a video, but do put your questions into the chat and we'll get to as many of them as possible. So now we're going to turn to some questions from our alumni here in the studio, the audience. And first we're going to hear a question from Ronan O'Flynn.
As a parent of a child with special needs, I'm very interested in the inclusive educational plans for the university. Are there any plans to improve the curriculum and the campus to improve the shared experience of people with different intellectual and physical abilities?
Yeah. Thank you for that question, a very important question again. And, one of the elements that really attracted me to Maynooth University was the commitment to diversity, equality, and enabling access to higher education, all who can benefit. And, widening access and participation, Maynooth is particularly impressive because of the broadness of it. There are, of course, students from different demographics. There are students who come from first in family, but also, just before I answer your specific questions, just more broadly, travelers and Roma students we've been engaged with for a long time, and also prisoners and ex-offenders. And, those are the sorts of populations that you could easily shy away from. But I really do take my hat off to previous presidents and other presidents who have not done so. So then, students with disabilities, all different types of disabilities, very important to enable these students to benefit from learning in the best possible way. And we have a very strong access team. We have a very strong curriculum development team who are focusing on that. And we have students who have physical disabilities, but also students, for instance, on the autistic continuum. I don't know whether I've ever said this, but I actually my research is in the area of children and young people on the autistic continuum. And my research teams are in Italy and Finland, and we are looking at particularly language processing deficits and abilities in these young people and children. So I'm committed to doing as much as we can for different types of student populations, and also very important element of that is that we hear the voice of those people. So one of the most impressive things, again, about Maynooth University is that we don't do things to people. We actually do it with people. Yeah. And so we are not making assumptions what should a learning be like for somebody who is, for instance, physically unable or limited. We actually hear the voice and want to do the right thing that fits them. So, and so plans for the future is that we want to strengthen this, and it's an important part also, Ronan, of our strategic planning. Thank you.
That's a very good point to segue to the future and
Yes.
your vision for the university. And it's a question that one of our alumni, Isabel Smith, poses. She goes back to your letter to the university community at Christmas, and she says that you mentioned the work that is taking place on the strategic plan. So perhaps you might just outline how you see that evolving and what your vision for the university is.
Yes, so we have started our strategic planning process, and important part of that process is consultation. And alumni will be an important part of that consultation, so I welcome you all to be part of that, and we will reach out to you in ways in which you can make a contribution. I have my ideas what the future Maynooth might look like, but I don't want to preempt our consultation. There will be some good ideas that will come through that. Consultation begins actually next week. I will start it by launching the consultation. This is the internal consultation first. There are various themes that we consult on, and we will invite the whole of the university community to be part. Given the digital age, one of the consultations for each theme will be in person and another one online on each theme. And then we will sort of gather the feedback from that, and then we do some deep dives. So that, some areas we probably drill down more. We have some world cafes with students involved in it. We have some big thinking workshops. This week we have a workshop with governing authority, starting to think about what the university future might look like. So there's a very inclusive process. And then importantly, external communities, and there was a question about Maynooth and connection to Maynooth as a community and Kildare and national organisations and bodies. So we are starting to finalise that external consultation plan, and then alumni, really important. And I have to say that the alumni who have reached out to me invariably are just so excited about the opportunity to be part of the thinking about the next strategy, the 5 to 10 years. And, I very much welcome that input and excitement.
On one aspect of this, we have a really excellent question from Kieran Kelly, who is an alumnus of the MSc in climate change. And his question is about the environment and what Maynooth is doing in respect of the promotion of green spaces and ecosystems. So perhaps you'd say something about that, Eeva.
There will be some cross-cutting themes, I would assume, in our strategy, and I think sustainability would be one of those, environmental sustainability would be one of those cross-cutting themes. And as you know, Maynooth also has very significant climate research that we carry out here, nationally, internationally renowned. Also connections to community. I've had some conversations, for instance, with the agriculture community here in Kildare, and their wish to connect with us around the climate change agenda and what can they do in order to advance the climate change agenda of Ireland. So there's many ways in which we can use our expertise as a university to advance those agendas. And then very briefly on campus itself, we have an amazing campus, John, as you know.
Especially on a day like today. Our alumni can't see, but it is absolutely radiant out there today.
Almost every day. I walk as much as I can on the campus, and we have a really vibrant and proactive Green Campus Committee. I've had the privilege of working a little bit with them. There's much going on, huge biodiversity, and I think we just have to enjoy that and again bring communities to enjoy that. Then there's of course the sustainability agenda relating to our buildings. You know, we have some challenging buildings because they're old buildings, but we need to find solutions for those. But of course all the new buildings that we are building are Green Star buildings and sustainable and so on. So I think we need to think very carefully whether we also set ourselves some agendas and some targets relating to some of these green agendas. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Eeva, for that hugely expansive set of comments. I'm going to go back now to Rebecca, and Rebecca is going to conclude our seminar.
We might actually have time for one or two more questions from our alumni audience, if that's okay. I'm going to ask Marie Tyler again.
Eeva, I'm just interested in your opinion, and not to preempt your strategic plan, but how do you see the university evolve in the digital era?
That's a really important question again, and I've been sort of reflecting back on my career and technology and learning particularly, and I've been on that journey for about 15 to 20 years, and I once led a blended learning unit in the United Kingdom, which was government funded. So this is, from a learning perspective, it's really important that we embrace the blend of face-to-face and the digital. And then from a working perspective, again, there are lots of opportunities. There are probably some challenges that we have to work through. And then digital infrastructure is something that I think we really need to think very carefully and pretty hard when we think about our strategic planning and the investments we may wish to make relating to that infrastructure. And then, of course, connectivity. And, one thing we haven't really mentioned, but I'm very keen to think about is Maynooth University in the global context. And the digital age enables us to connect in lots of different ways, and we are doing that already. But also, where do we want to be as a university in the global context? And once we decide that, how do we get there? Huge connectivity already, but also I think diversifying some of our student population is important, and bringing more international students on campus, but also connecting our students to our partners globally. So the digital age is an exciting age, I think. That is something that I think we are in a sort of transition phase at the moment, and the pandemic has sort of accelerated that thinking.
Thanks. That's a great question from our data scientists in the audience, and it dovetails well with a question that's come in online. Just to echo it, actually, that it's a 2017 electronic engineering grad who was similarly asking about or suggesting new PhDs and masters in fields like AI, the whole ICT sector, data science, and all of that. So I'm sure that's something that would be considered as part of the strategic plan. I think we have one more time for one more question from Peter Finnegan here in the audience.
Mike Wrights back. My question kind of relates to Roland's in some ways, but it's more about the outward-facing impact of the university on society, both nationally and globally, and particularly in relation to areas that we have had a reputation of because of work here on the academic side and the research side, but also because of the work of alumni, like John Hume, for example, on issues like conflict resolution, on issues like social justice, equality and diversity. Any ideas how we might up our actions in terms of how that impact can happen on the wider world?
Yes. Thank you, Peter, for that question. And I think that is part of that thinking we have to do as a university about the impact of the university locally, regionally, nationally, and globally. And there are some areas, as you say, Peter, that we are well known for. And I think my view would be that we have been a little bit shy telling the world what we're really good at and telling our story. And I think there's a lot of opportunities to tell some good narratives about ourselves to the world. And there are many. And then I think, so upping would be that we tell people, we have more narratives that we want to take to the world. But also, through the strategic planning, we will more than likely identify areas where we want to step up. And then I'm a great believer that you have to put a resource around that so that we are able to step up. So I think those are probably some of the sort of early thoughts. And I do just realize that I could have said on the digital age question, which is something just came to mind, is I recently listened to a talk by Sir Adrian Smith, who is the president of Royal Society. And he was asked a question in the end, that what if he could just summarize in one word what the future is about. He said, data. Yeah. So I really think that as a university we have such strength in data, data governance and utilization of data in all our research and so on. So I think that again would be one of those beacons particularly that we might wish to shine very bright to the world.
Great. Well, thank you so much,
Thank you.
Professor Leinonen and Professor Brennan. It's really wonderful to have you all here today in person, and to our audience and our alumni all around the world who are joining us. Thank you so much. Look out for more opportunities to engage in this strategic planning discussions over the coming months and the year ahead. There'll be a survey, there'll be other opportunities for conversation, so please look out in your email inbox for those. And also keep an eye and save the date for September 17th. That is our alumni reunion here on campus. It's a great chance to gather all your friends and come back and celebrate this beautiful place and campus once again. Thanks everyone for being here today.
Thank you.